Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
When my mom gave my car to my brother without asking, I was furious. But when he totaled it and they told me to stop being difficult, I realized this wasn't just about a car. It was about a lifetime of being taken for granted. Now, they're asking me to share my inheritance, and I don't know if I can forgive them. A few months ago, I was finally feeling like things were falling into place. After years of living paycheck to paycheck, scrimping, and saving every penny I could, I'd managed to buy my first car. It wasn't flashy or luxurious, but it was brand new and completely mine. Seeing it parked outside my apartment every day gave me a sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt in a long time. For years, I'd relied on public transportation or borrowed rides from friends, so having my own car felt like a game changer. I'd even joked about naming it because it felt like a new member of the family. It represented independence, freedom, and a reward for all the hard work I'd put into getting my finances in order. But as much as I loved my car, I noticed that my younger brother Jake seemed to love it even more. Jake was 22 and still figuring out his life. Or so my mom liked to say when defending him. He dropped out of college after his first semester, bounced between part-time jobs, and relied heavily on my mom's support. They were close, my mom and Jake, to the point where she seemed to excuse every mistake he made. Jake started showing a lot of interest in my car from the moment I brought it home. "Man, this thing drives smooth, doesn't it?" he'd say, running his hand along the hood whenever he came over. "What's the mileage like?" "But it's way better than those clunkers I've been stuck with." At first, I thought it was just admiration, maybe even a little envy. But there was something about the way he kept bringing it up that felt off. Once, he half-jokingly said, "If you ever get bored of it, I'll take it off your hands." I laughed it off at the time, thinking he was kidding. Now, I wonder if he was testing the waters. My mom, of course, thought it was sweet how interested Jake was in the car. "He's just so proud of you," she'd say. "He loves seeing you do well." Looking back, I wish I'd paid more attention to the way she'd casually dismiss my concerns, like when I mentioned that Jake was a little too eager to get behind the wheel. Then came the weekend that changed everything. I had a work trip out of town and decided to leave my car at my mom's house. Her neighborhood was quieter and safer than mine, and it felt like the responsible thing to do. I even told her, "Make sure no one touches it while I'm gone." She laughed. "Don't worry, it'll be fine, Jake, and I will keep an eye on it for you." In hindsight, those words should have been a red flag. Jake keeping an eye on anything usually meant trouble. But I trusted her. She was my mom, after all. I didn't think she'd let anything happen to something that meant so much to me. As I drove off to the airport that morning, I had no idea what was coming. If I'd known, maybe I would have parked my car somewhere else, or kept it with me entirely. Because leaving it in my mom's driveway turned out to be one of the worst decisions I'd ever made. When I got back from my work trip, I was exhausted, but relieved to be home. All I wanted to do was grab my car, head back to my apartment, and decompress. But as I pulled into my mom's driveway to pick it up, my stomach twisted. The car wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe I'd misremembered where I'd parked it. Travel can mess with your brain like that, right? I walked around the house, checking the street, and even the garage, but it was nowhere to be found. My heart started racing as all kinds of scenarios ran through my mind. Had it been stolen? Towed? I rushed into the house where my mom was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like everything was fine. "Mom," I said, trying to stay calm, "where's my car?" She looked up, completely unfazed. "Oh, Jake borrowed it," she said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Jake what?" I asked, my voice rising. "He needed to run some errands," she said, still scrolling her phone. "You weren't using it, so I let him take it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, that's my car," I said, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. "He didn't even ask me." "Stop being so dramatic," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "It's just a car. He'll bring it back. It's not a big deal." It was a big deal. That car represented years of hard work, sacrifices, and sleepless nights. It wasn't just a thing, it was a milestone. And now, it was gone, all because my mom had decided it was okay to loan it out without even asking me. I tried calling Jake, but he didn't answer. I paced the living room, my frustration building with every passing minute. "Mom, why would you let him take it without asking me?" She sighed, clearly annoyed with me. "You're overreacting. Jake's responsible. He just needed to pick up a few things. He'll be back soon." "Responsible?" I repeated, incredulous. This is the same Jake who can't hold down a job for more than a month. The same Jake who— "Enough," she snapped. "I'm not going to sit here and listen to you talk about your brother like that. He's going through a lot right now, and he needed the car. End of story. Her words left me speechless. It was like she didn't even care how much this affected me, as long as Jake got what he wanted. But before I could fully process her indifference, my phone buzzed. It was Jake finally calling me back. "Hey," he said, sounding unusually nervous. So there's been a little accident." My heart sank. "What do you mean, a little accident?" I demanded. "Well, I kind of, hit something," he stammered. "But it's not that bad. Don't freak out." "Where are you?" I said, already grabbing my keys. He gave me an address, and I sped over, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw when I arrived. There was my car, or what was left of it. The front end was crumpled like an accordion, the windshield was shattered, and the airbags had deployed. Jake was standing off to the side, looking sheepish but unharmed. "Jake," I said, my voice shaking as I approached him. "What the hell happened?" He shrugged, avoiding my gaze. I lost control and hit a pole. "But don't worry, insurance will take care of it." I stared at him in disbelief. "Insurance? Jake, you're not even on my policy. And what makes you think this is okay? You took my car without asking, and now it's totaled." "It's just a car," he said defensively. "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" "A big deal?" My blood was boiling. "You've destroyed something I worked years for, something I paid for with my own money, and you think it's not a big deal." Jake held up his hands like I was the unreasonable one. "Look, I said I'm sorry. What more do you want from me?" I couldn't even form a response. The anger, the frustration, the sheer disbelief, it was too much. I turned to my mom, hoping for some backup, but her reaction made my blood run cold. "Oh, for crying out loud," she said. "It's not the end of the world. Accidents happen. Stop being so difficult." Her words hit me harder than the sight of my wrecked car. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about Jake or the car. It was about a pattern where Jake could do no wrong, and I was always the one who had to stop being difficult. I didn't know how, but I knew this was just the beginning of a much bigger fight. By the time Jake's panic call came through, I was already on edge. After finding out he'd taken my car without permission, I'd spent the entire afternoon trying to process my anger and my mom's indifference. So when my phone buzzed and Jake's name appeared on the screen, my first thought was that he was finally bringing the car back. "Hey," he said, his voice shaky. "What is it, Jake?" I asked, barely containing my frustration. So there's been a little accident," he said. My stomach dropped. "What kind of accident?" I demanded, gripping my phone tightly. I kind of hit a pole," he said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "But don't worry, it's not that bad." "Not that bad," I repeated, my voice rising. "Jake, where are you? Tell me where you are right now." He gave me an address, and I grabbed my keys, my mind racing as I sped toward the location. The neighborhood was only a few miles away, but the drive felt like an eternity. My thoughts were a blur of anger, fear, and disbelief. How bad could it really be? When I pulled up to the scene, my heart sank. My car was unrecognizable. The front end was crumpled like a tin can, the windshield shattered into a spiderweb of cracks, and the airbags hung limply from the dashboard. A utility pole leaned precariously to the side, evidence of the impact. Jake was standing off to the side, looking like a guilty kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. He was unharmed, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Jake," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of relief and fury. "What the hell happened?" He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. I lost control," he mumbled. "But hey, at least no one was hurt, right? At least no one was hurt." I repeated, incredulous. "Jake, look at my car. It's totaled." He held up his hands defensively. "Okay, yeah, it looks bad, but it's just a car. Insurance will take care of it." The casual way he said it made my blood boil. "You're not even on my policy," I snapped. "You took my car without asking, wrecked it, and now you're acting like it's no big deal." "Look, I said I'm sorry," he said, his tone more annoyed than apologetic. "What else do you want me to say?" "What I want," I said through gritted teeth, "is for you to take responsibility for what you've done." He rolled his eyes, like I was the one being unreasonable. "It's not like I did it on purpose," he muttered. At that point, I turned to my mom, who had shown up shortly after I arrived. I was desperate for some kind of support, some acknowledgement of how wrong this was. But instead of backing me up, she shrugged. "Jake said he's sorry," she said. "What more do you want from him?" "What more do I want?" I repeated, stunned. "I want him to own up to the fact that he took my car without permission and destroyed it. I want him to understand what that car meant to me." "It's just a car," she said dismissively. "You have insurance. This isn't the end of the world." The words felt like a slap in the face. I couldn't believe how casually they were both treating this. Like the loss of my car, something I'd worked so hard for, was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Jake, meanwhile, had started scrolling on his phone, clearly ready to move on from the situation. "So, are we good here?" he asked, not even looking up. "No, Jake," I said, my voice shaking with barely contained rage. "We're not good. You've wrecked my car, and now you're acting like it's not your problem." "Well, what do you want me to do?" he shot back. "I don't have the money to fix it. You're going to have to deal with it." His nonchalance was infuriating, but it was my mom's next words that truly broke me. "You're being difficult," she said, her tone sharp. "This isn't helping anyone. The car is gone, and there's nothing we can do about it now. Stop making such a big deal out of it." In that moment, I realized just how deep the favoritism ran. It wasn't just that Jake had wrecked my car. It was that my mom was willing to excuse it, to minimize my feelings, all to protect him. I didn't know how to respond. The anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it all felt overwhelming. All I knew was that this wasn't just about a car anymore. This was about something much bigger, and I wasn't sure our family could ever come back from it. When we got back to my mom's house, I was still seething. The drive home had done nothing to cool my anger. Every time I looked at Jake in the passenger seat, scrolling on his phone like nothing had happened, my frustration bubbled over again. As soon as we walked inside, I turned to my mom. "We need to talk about this," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. She sighed heavily, already acting like I was the one causing trouble. "What is there to talk about?" "Jake made a mistake. It happens." "No, Mom," I said, my tone firm. "This isn't just a mistake. He took my car without asking, wrecked it, and now you're both acting like it's no big deal." I started pacing the living room, trying to put my feelings into words. "Do you have any idea how hard I worked for that car? How much it meant to me? It wasn't just about transportation. It was about independence, about finally having something that was mine." Jake plopped down on the couch, still glued to his phone. "Look, I already said I'm sorry. What else do you want from me?" I rounded on him. "I want you to take responsibility, Jake. I want you to understand what you've done and stop acting like this is just some minor inconvenience." He shrugged. "It's not like I did it on purpose," he said, echoing my mom's earlier words. "Accidents happen. Chill out. Chill out." I repeated, incredulous. "You totaled my car, Jake. That's not something you just brush off with an oops." I turned back to my mom, hoping for some backup, some acknowledgement of how wrong this all was. "Mom, you have to see how serious this is." He didn't even ask me before taking it. "How is that okay?" But she just waved me off, her expression weary. "You're overreacting," she said. "It's not like he stole it. He borrowed it because he needed it. And besides, you weren't even using it." "That doesn't matter," I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "It's my car. It's not about whether I was using it. It's about respect." Jake didn't ask me because he knew I'd say no. And now, because of that, my car is gone. My mom crossed her arms, her patience clearly wearing thin. "You have insurance," she said. "Why are you making such a big deal out of this?" Her words felt like a slap in the face. I couldn't believe how casually she was dismissing my feelings, how easily she was making excuses for Jake. Jake, meanwhile, was acting like he couldn't wait for the conversation to end. "Seriously, why are you so mad?" he said, finally putting down his phone. I said, "I'm sorry. It's not like I'm happy about what happened. What more do you want?" "I want you to take some responsibility, Jake," I said, my voice trembling with frustration. "You caused this mess, and now you're acting like it's not your problem." "What do you expect me to do?" he shot back. "I don't have the money to fix it. I don't even have a job right now. You're the one with insurance. You'll figure it out." His words left me speechless. The audacity, the entitlement, it was overwhelming. But before I could respond, my mom stepped in. "That's enough," she said sharply, glaring at me like I was the one out of line. "This isn't helping anyone. The car is gone, and there's nothing we can do about it now. Stop being so difficult." Difficult. That word hit me like a ton of bricks. It wasn't the first time my mom had used it to describe me, but in that moment it felt like a condemnation. It didn't matter that I was the one who'd been wronged, the one who'd lost something valuable. All that mattered was making sure Jake didn't feel bad. I sank into the armchair, feeling defeated. "So that's it?" I said quietly. "Jake wrecks my car, and I'm the one who has to deal with it? No consequences for him? No accountability?" "Accidents happen," my mom repeated, her tone softening as she turned to Jake. "We're just glad you're okay, honey." That was the final straw. I stood up, grabbing my bag. "You know what? Forget it," I said, heading for the door. Clearly, nothing I say matters. Where are you going? My mom called after me, but I didn't answer. I couldn't stay in that house another minute. As I drove back to my apartment in a borrowed car, a heavy sense of betrayal settled over me. It wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about a pattern where Jake could do no wrong. And I was always the one who had to stop being difficult. And for the first time, I started to wonder if this was a relationship I could salvage, or if it was time to start putting some distance between myself and the family I thought I could always count on. The first thing I did the next morning was call my insurance company. I wanted to believe that things might start looking up, that at least some of this mess could be resolved with a straightforward claim. But as soon as I explained the situation, I could tell from the agent's tone that this wasn't going to be easy. So, just to confirm, the agent said, her voice professional, but unyielding, your brother was driving the car at the time of the accident, and he's not listed as a driver on your policies? That's correct, I said, dreading her next words. Unfortunately, in cases like this, we can't cover the damages, she said. Our policyholder agreements specify that only listed drivers are covered. Since he's not on the policy and he doesn't have his own insurance, this claim would be denied. For a moment, I couldn't speak. What am I supposed to do then? I asked, my voice trembling. Well, you could pursue the driver for damages, she said, as if that was a viable solution. I hung up the phone, my head spinning. Pursue Jake for damages? Jake didn't have a cent to his name, let alone the ability to pay for a totaled car. When I told my mom what had happened, I expected her to share in my frustration. Surely, now she'd realize how serious this was, how much of a burden Jake's actions had placed on me. But instead of sympathy, I got a shrug. Well, we can't afford to help you, she said matter-of-factly. You'll just have to figure it out. Figure it out? I repeated, incredulous. Jake caused this mess. He should be the one figuring it out. She sighed like I was being unreasonable. Jake doesn't have any money, she said. And it's not like he did it on purpose. You'll just have to find a way to make it work. Her indifference was staggering. I couldn't believe she was brushing off something so massive, something that had completely upended my life. I turned to Jake, who was sitting at the kitchen table, munching on a bowl of cereal as if nothing had happened. This is on you, I said, pointing at him. You wrecked my car. You need to take responsibility. He looked up, chewing slowly. I told you, he said after swallowing. I don't have any money. What do you want me to do? I don't know, I snapped. Get a job? Make a payment plan. Sell something. Do anything other than sit there like it's not your problem. It's not that simple, he said, leaning back in his chair. And honestly, it's not like you're totally blameless. You left the car at Mom's house, so technically it's kind of on you. His words left me speechless. Not only was he refusing to take accountability, but now he was trying to pin the blame on me. You've got to be kidding me, I finally said, my voice shaking with anger. I trusted you to respect my property. I trusted Mom to make sure it was safe. And now, because you couldn't be bothered to ask me for permission, my car is gone, and I'm stuck with the consequences. Jake shrugged again, his face annoyingly calm. I said I was sorry. What else do you want? Blood. It's not about saying sorry, I shot back. It's about actions. It's about taking some damn responsibility for what you've done. But it was clear that Jake wasn't going to budge. He had no intention of taking responsibility, and my mom wasn't going to make him. You're blowing this out of proportion, my mom said, cutting in. Yes, it's a tough situation, but you'll get through it. You're smart and capable. You'll figure it out. Jake doesn't need you hounding him on top of everything else he's dealing with. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Everything else he's dealing with? I repeated, my voice rising. What exactly is he dealing with, Mom? He has no job, no responsibilities, and no accountability. Meanwhile, I've worked my ass off to buy that car, and now it's gone. But sure, let's keep making excuses for Jake. That's enough, she said sharply, her face hardening. I won't let you talk about your brother that way. He's going through a rough time, and he made a mistake. You need to stop being so hard on him. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Once again, Jake's actions were being brushed aside, and I was being painted as the unreasonable one. Fine, I said finally, grabbing my bag and heading for the door. If you won't hold him accountable, I guess I'll just have to figure it out on my own. But don't expect me to keep pretending like this is okay. As I drove away, the weight of the situation settled over me like a cloud. I didn't know how I was going to replace my car, how I was going to move forward from this mess. All I knew was that I was on my own. After the insurance fiasco and my mom's indifference, I thought things couldn't possibly get worse. But they did. The more I tried to address the situation and hold Jake accountable, the more I found myself painted as the villain. Any attempt to discuss the car, the financial burden, or Jake's blatant lack of responsibility was met with eye rolls and exasperated sighs. My mom started accusing me of being difficult and holding a grudge, phrases that stung every time she said them. "You just can't let things go, can you?" she said one evening when I brought up the issue again. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. Jake made a mistake. Why can't you forgive him and move on?" Jake, of course, latched onto this narrative with gusto. One day, as I was sitting in the kitchen trying to work out how I could possibly afford a replacement car, he strolled in with his typical carefree attitude. "You're just mad because I borrowed your car," he said, grabbing a soda from the fridge. "You've always been uptight about stuff like this." The audacity of his words left me momentarily speechless. Borrowed? He didn't borrow my car. He took it without permission and totaled it. "Are you serious right now?" I finally managed to say, my voice laced with disbelief. "What?" he said with a shrug. "It's not like I did it on purpose. Accidents happen. You're acting like I crashed it just to mess with you. You didn't even ask me, Jake," I said, my frustration boiling over. "You took something that wasn't yours, wrecked it, and now you're acting like I'm the one who's out of line?" Instead of apologizing, Jake doubled down. "You're such a control freak," he said, rolling his eyes. "This is why no one can stand arguing with you. You make everything a big deal." His words hit harder than I expected. It wasn't just the accusation. It was the realization that Jake genuinely believed he'd done nothing wrong. In his mind, I was the unreasonable one, the uptight sibling who couldn't let go of a minor inconvenience. I turned to my mom, hoping for some kind of support, but she only made things worse. "Jake's been through a lot," she said, her voice filled with that familiar tone of maternal protectiveness. "He's trying his best, and you could show a little more compassion." "Compassion?" I repeated, incredulous. "For the person who wrecked my car and hasn't shown an ounce of remorse? Are you kidding me?" She sighed, like she was tired of the whole thing. "You don't know what it's like to be in his position," she said. "He's struggling, and the last thing he needs is you piling on." It felt like we were living in two different realities. In mine, Jake was an irresponsible adult who had caused a major problem and refused to take accountability. In theirs, Jake was a fragile victim who needed to be coddled and protected at all costs. The more I tried to make my case, the more I felt like I was shouting into a void. No matter how many times I explained how much the car meant to me, how hard I'd worked for it, or how devastating its loss was, my mom and Jake dismissed my feelings as overreacting. "You're obsessed with that car," Jake said one afternoon when I refused to drop the subject. "It's weird. Maybe this is a good thing. Now you can finally focus on something else for a change." The sheer audacity of his comment left me reeling. "It's not about the car, Jake," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "It's about the fact that you don't respect me, my boundaries, or my hard work. You've shown zero remorse for what you've done, and you don't even care how this has affected me. But no matter how many times I tried to explain, it was like talking to a brick wall." Jake continued to act like the victim, while my mom treated me like the problem. "She's always been like this," Jake said one evening, loud enough for me to hear from the other room. "She just can't let things go. It's exhausting. She means well," my mom replied, her voice filled with pity. "But she doesn't know how to handle things gracefully." Gracefully. That word played in my head over and over. What was graceful about having to pay for a totaled car because of someone else's actions? What was graceful about being dismissed and gaslit by your own family? As the weeks went on, the rift between us grew deeper. I started avoiding family dinners and staying away from the house as much as possible. Being around them felt like walking into enemy territory, where every word I said would be twisted against me. The worst part was the loneliness. I'd always thought of my family as my support system, the people I could rely on no matter what. But now, it felt like they were on a completely different team, one that I didn't belong to anymore. And as much as it hurt, I began to realize that this wasn't just about the car. It was about years of favoritism, years of being dismissed and told to stop being difficult, years of watching Jake get away with everything while I was held to a higher standard. I didn't know how to fix it, or if I even wanted to. All I knew was that things couldn't go on like this forever. Something had to change. Months went by, and the unresolved tension between me, Jake, and my mom festered like an open wound. Every interaction was strained, every conversation laced with unspoken resentment. I avoided family gatherings as much as I could, and when I did show up, I made sure to keep my distance from Jake. He, of course, carried on as if nothing had happened. He still had that same carefree attitude, breezing in and out of my mom's house like he owned the place. He didn't have a job, didn't contribute to the household, and didn't seem to care about anything beyond his immediate gratification. Meanwhile, I was working extra hours to save up for a new car, juggling responsibilities while silently stewing over the unfairness of it all. Then came the dinner that changed everything. It was a Sunday evening, one of those rare occasions where I decided to join my mom and Jake for a meal. Things were awkward but manageable until my mom casually dropped a bombshell in the middle of the conversation. "Your dad and I have been updating our will," she said, setting down her fork. "We wanted to make sure everything is clear, just in case something happens." I nodded, not thinking much of it. "That's a good idea. We've decided to split everything equally between you and Jake," she continued, as if this was a completely normal and reasonable statement. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. "Wait, what? We're dividing everything 50-50, she said, looking at me like I was the one being strange. "After everything he's done, you're giving him the same as me?" I asked, incredulous. "How is that even remotely fair?" My mom sighed, her tone turning defensive. "He's still your brother," she said, as if that explained everything. "And he needs the help more than you do." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. "Help? He doesn't need help, Mom. He needs accountability. He's 22 years old and refuses to take responsibility for anything. And now you're rewarding him for it." She shook her head, clearly exasperated. "This isn't about rewarding anyone. It's about making sure both of you are taken care of. You've always been so independent, so capable. Jake isn't." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So, because I've worked hard and managed to stand on my own 2 feet, I get the same as someone who's done nothing but coast through life? How is that fair?" "Life isn't always fair," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "But he's still family. And family helps each other." It felt like déjà vu, like we were right back in the aftermath of the car crash. Once again, Jake's irresponsibility was being excused, and I was being told to suck it up. I turned to Jake, who was sitting across the table, smirking like he'd just won the lottery. "You don't see a problem with this?" I asked him, my voice sharp. "Why would I?" he said, leaning back in his chair. "It's not my fault you're mad at Mom and Dad's decision. Maybe you should stop being so jealous." "Jealous?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You think this is about jealousy? This is about fairness. This is about the fact that you've done nothing to deserve what they're giving you. And I'm sick of pretending like that's okay." "See?" he said, turning to my mom. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. She's always looking for a reason to be mad at me." My mom placed a hand on my arm, as if trying to calm me down. "Please don't let this come between you and your brother," she said. "We just want what's best for both of you." I pulled my arm away, shaking my head in disbelief. "What's best for both of us?" "No, Mom. What you want is to avoid conflict. You don't care about fairness or accountability. You just want to keep enabling Jake because it's easier than holding him responsible." Her face hardened. "That's not true," she said firmly. "We're trying to do what's right." "No," I said, standing up from the table. "You're doing what's easy, and I'm done playing along." I left the house that night feeling a mix of anger and heartbreak. It wasn't about the inheritance itself. I didn't care about the money. It was about the principle, about the years of favoritism and enabling that this decision represented. For the first time, I started to wonder if there was anything left to salvage in my relationship with my mom and Jake. It felt like a breaking point, a line I couldn't uncross. As much as I wanted to believe things could change, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of the end. The inheritance conversation didn't end that night. If anything, it snowballed, becoming the focal point of every interaction I had with my mom. She couldn't understand why I was so upset, and I couldn't understand why she was so adamant about defending Jake. The tension between us, already fragile, grew thicker with every passing day. It all came to a head during a phone call a few weeks later. I was still stewing over the injustice of it all, replaying that dinner conversation in my head when my mom called out of the blue. At first, her tone was calm, even conciliatory. "Sweetheart, I've been thinking a lot about what you said," she began. For a moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she'd finally seen my side, finally understood how unfair this all was. But then she added, "I think you're letting your anger cloud your judgment. This isn't about fairness, it's about family." "Family?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Mom, this isn't about family. This is about enabling Jake while punishing me for doing the right thing." "How is that fair?" "It's not about punishment," she said, her tone hardening. "It's about moving forward. And right now, you're the one holding everyone back." "Holding everyone back?" I asked, incredulous. "I'm not the one who wrecked someone's car and refused to take responsibility. I'm not the one who's coasted through life without consequences. But somehow, I'm the problem. You're making yourself the problem, she snapped. We've made our decision, and if you can't accept it, maybe we need to rethink your share. Her words hit me like a physical blow. Are you serious right now? I asked, my voice trembling. You're punishing me for standing up for myself? You're punishing yourself, she replied coldly. You're the one making this difficult. The audacity of her statement left me speechless. For years, I'd worked hard, played by the rules, and tried to do the right thing. And now, because I refused to let Jake's behavior slide, I was the one being penalized? Let me get this straight, I said, struggling to keep my emotions in check. You're willing to risk our relationship, risk losing me as a daughter, just to keep Jake happy? This isn't about Jake, she said firmly. It's about keeping the family together. And right now, you're the one creating division. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. So, I'm supposed to just sit back and accept that Jake gets rewarded for his irresponsibility while I get treated like I'm the bad guy? That's your idea of keeping the family together. You're twisting my words, she said, her voice rising. This isn't about rewards or punishments. It's about love and support, something you clearly don't understand. Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. I don't understand? I repeated. I've spent my entire life trying to do the right thing, trying to make you proud. And now, because I'm asking for a little fairness, you're acting like I'm the villain. How is that love? How is that support? Maybe you should take a look at yourself, she said coldly. You've let your resentment for Jake poison everything. Until you can let that go, you're only hurting yourself. I realized then that there was no point in arguing. No matter what I said, no matter how much evidence I presented, my mom had made her choice. She'd chosen Jake again and again, and she wasn't going to stop now. Fine, I said, my voice breaking. If that's how you feel, I guess there's nothing left to say. Don't do this, she said, her tone softening slightly. We're a family. We need to stick together. Maybe you should tell that to Jake, I said bitterly before hanging up. After the call, I sat in my apartment, staring at the phone and trying to process what had just happened. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and betrayal. This wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. It was about years of being dismissed, years of being told to stop being difficult while Jake got away with everything. I thought about calling her back, trying one last time to make her see my side. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't make a difference. My mom and I were speaking two different languages, living in two different worlds. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. Things would never be the same again. The fallout from the inheritance conversation didn't stay confined to our immediate family for long. Somehow, word spread. Maybe my mom vented to an aunt, or Jake let something slip to a cousin. But soon, the entire extended family was involved. And as with any family drama, everyone had an opinion. Some relatives sided with me, agreeing that Jake's actions were indefensible. He's never been held accountable for anything, one cousin told me in a whispered phone call. It's about time someone called him out. Others, however, took my mom's side, insisting that I was being selfish and unreasonable. It's not about what he's done, my aunt said during one particularly tense phone call. It's about what kind of family you want to have. Do you really want this to come between you and your brother? Holidays became a minefield. Thanksgiving was the first major gathering after the drama erupted, and I spent the entire car ride there trying to psych myself up for what I knew was coming. As soon as I walked through the door, I felt the tension in the air. Conversations hushed when I entered the room, and I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me. My mom greeted me with a stiff smile, and Jake barely acknowledged my presence. Throughout the meal, the comments were subtle but pointed. It's so important to forgive, one aunt said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Holding grudges just tears families apart. Some people don't understand what it means to put family first, another relative chimed in, casting a sideways glance in my direction. I bit my tongue, determined not to let them get a rise out of me. But by the time dessert was served, I was ready to leave. The unspoken accusations, the awkward silences, the constant sense of being outnumbered, it was too much. After Thanksgiving, I made the decision to stop attending family gatherings altogether. It wasn't worth the emotional toll. Every visit felt like a battle, with people taking sides and throwing passive-aggressive comments my way. Christmas was the hardest to skip. My mom called me multiple times, asking if I'd reconsider, saying things like, "It won't be the same without you." But I knew better. Going would only make things worse for me and for everyone else. Instead, I spent the holidays alone for the first time in my life. It was bittersweet, but also strangely peaceful. For once, I didn't have to brace myself for conflict or walk on eggshells around people who clearly didn't understand my perspective. But as much as I tried to focus on the positives, the absence of my family weighed heavily on me. The hardest part wasn't the loss of the holidays or the awkwardness with extended relatives. It was the realization that I'd lost my mom's trust and support. My mom had always been my anchor, the person I could turn to no matter what. But now, it felt like she didn't even see me anymore. Every time we talked, it was like she was trying to convince me to come back to the fold, to let go of my grudge and make peace with Jake. "You're tearing this family apart," she said during one particularly heated phone call. "Jake's trying his best, and all you're doing is making things harder for everyone." "I'm not the one tearing us apart," I shot back. "Jake did that when he refused to take responsibility for what he did. And you did it when you decided to take his side over mine." "You're being dramatic," she said with a sigh. "I just want us to be a family again." But how could we be a family when she refused to acknowledge the root of the problem? How could I trust her when she seemed so determined to protect Jake at my expense? As the months went on, the rift between us only deepened. I started avoiding her calls, unsure of how to navigate our increasingly strained relationship. Every conversation felt like a losing battle, and I was tired of fighting. Meanwhile, Jake carried on as if nothing had happened. He still had my mom wrapped around his finger, and she still treated him like the golden child who could do no wrong. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. I missed the way things used to be, the easy conversations, the sense of belonging, the unconditional love I'd always taken for granted. But now, it felt like that love came with conditions I couldn't meet without sacrificing my principles. I didn't know if things would ever go back to normal. All I knew was that the family I thought I could always count on was no longer the same. And as much as it hurt, I was starting to accept that maybe it never would be. The call came on a quiet Tuesday evening. I was unwinding after a long day at work, trying not to think about the ongoing tension with my family, when my phone buzzed. My mom's name lit up the screen. Part of me didn't want to answer. Every conversation with her lately had been a struggle, a tug-of-war between her insistence on unity and my refusal to back down. But despite everything, she was still my mom, and a small part of me held on to the hope that maybe this time would be different. "Hi, Mom," I said cautiously, bracing myself for whatever was coming. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, her tone unervingly gentle. "I've been thinking a lot about our family and how things have been lately." For a moment, I thought she might actually be calling to apologize or at least acknowledge my feelings. But then she added, "I think it's time we put all this behind us. I wanted to talk to you about the inheritance." My heart sank. "What about it?" "Well," she said, hesitating slightly, "your father and I have been discussing it, and we think it would be best if you reconsidered how it's divided. Maybe you could share part of your share with Jake, just to keep the peace." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything Jake had done, taking my car without permission, wrecking it, refusing to take responsibility, and stirring up endless family drama, my mom was now asking me to reward him? "You gotta be kidding me," I said, my voice sharp. "Sweetheart, please," she said, her tone shifting to one of exasperation. "This isn't about rewarding anyone. It's about moving forward as a family. Jake needs help more than you do, and this could be a way to mend things." "Mend things?" I repeated, incredulous. "Mom, Jake has never once apologized or taken accountability for anything. And now you're asking me to give up what's rightfully mine to make him feel better." "It's not about making him feel better," she insisted. "It's about keeping the family together. We all need to make sacrifices sometimes." I could feel my frustration boiling over. Why is it always me who has to make the sacrifices? Why is it always me who has to compromise while Jake gets away with everything? "You're not compromising," she said, her voice growing cold. "You're being stubborn. This isn't just about you. It's about the bigger picture." "No, Mom," I said firmly. "This has never been about the bigger picture. It's always been about Jake. It's always been about protecting him, enabling him, and ignoring the damage he's done. And I'm done with it." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, my mom spoke, her voice heavy with disappointment. "I just don't understand why you're being so difficult. Jake is your brother. Don't you love him?" Her words felt like a slap. "Of course I love him," I said, my voice trembling. "But love doesn't mean letting someone walk all over you. It doesn't mean sacrificing your own happiness and principles to protect someone who refuses to take responsibility for their actions." "Then I guess there's nothing more to say," she said quietly. "You're right," I said, my heart breaking even as I spoke the words. "You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine. I'm done being the scapegoat. I'm done pretending like this is okay." I hung up the phone, tears streaming down my face. Walking away from my family was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but I knew it was the right choice. I couldn't keep sacrificing my mental health and self-respect to maintain relationships that were so one-sided. In the weeks that followed, the silence was deafening. My mom didn't call, Jake didn't reach out, and I didn't make any effort to contact them. The emptiness was painful, but it was also liberating. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. I still love my family, and I always will. But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes walking away is the only way to protect yourself. And as much as it hurts, I know I made the right decision.